Porsche, they're betting big on electric SUVs. But their last bet didn't exactly go to plan. The Macan Electric landed with, how shall we say this, a thud. Slow adoption, price shock, mixed reviews. So now the spotlight shifts to the stage that reinvented the company over 20 years ago. The Cayenne. There's going to be a Cayenne Electric, and of course, this being Porsche, a Cayenne Electric Turbo. New design, new motors, new battery, new suspension, and Porsche's answer to the question that no one asked out loud. Can they get an electric SUV right this time? Let's find out. Riddle me this, why does a person buy one car over the other? They could say performance, efficiency, cost, but in reality, if we're honest with ourselves, it's about the way it looks, it's about the design. And here, in one fell swoop, it looks like any other Porsche Cayenne that came before it, but it's very different for a couple of reasons. First, it's more organic. You look at it and you definitely see the haunches that were made famous by 911s. Here it's a little bit more pronounced in this fourth generation of Cayenne. We have the 4 points on the lights. And then here, the organic look it's almost like a shark nose hair. And yes, I don't have any shoes on because apparently there wasn't a budget to paint the Psyche here. So I'm sharing with you the red socks, which actually good contrast with the gray. Then we look over here, a bit of a Subaru influence with a two-tone here. This changes depending on which model of Cayenne. We'll get into that later. The wheels, that's something fascinating here because they go from 20s to 22s, and that helps kind of fill out the wheel arches, so it looks a little bit more aggressive, even the most basic car. Now, as we move further back, this is where we get a bit more pageantry in the design. Again, unlike previous Cayennes, where I don't want to say they've been slab-sided, but there hasn't been a lot of shape. Here, they've added a significant amount of shape, where the curvature is very much from Porsche, but then it bows out again here to the point where the width, it almost gives you like this feel that, oh my God, this is a wider car. I don't really understand why. This is the reason why. And as we come back around here, they all have an active spoiler in the back. So this deploys based on the actual mode or speed of the car. Now, as we move over to the curious case of the turbo electric, that's where we have to have a discussion about air management, getting air efficiently around the vehicle. In theory, that's the whole point of electric cars, to make them more efficient. You could have smaller, bigger batteries, hopefully make them lighter in the future, but really it's still about getting air around the vehicle. And this is where we have a couple of things going on. Number one, we get into coefficient of drag. What's coefficient of drag? Well, that's the measurement of getting air around the vehicle. It's tested in a wind tunnel. Here it's 0.25. Now that sounds lovely, but without a reference, it means nothing. The previous Cayenne, I really shouldn't say the previous Cayenne, the Cayenne that has a gasoline engine, which will still be on offer, that's 0.35. So this is orders of magnitude different. How do they do that? Well, the car sits lower. This is an inch lower than a gasoline-powered Cayenne. Then there's the active shutters. You and I saw this for the first time, believe it or not, in 2011 with a Chevrolet Cruze, which was actually a good car and could be gotten with a manual transmission. Here, in the Turbo, they have these active shutters on the sides in the front and on the sides in the rear. Now, from what I've told by the product manager of this vehicle, there was a huge debate between design and the engineers. Design wanted these organic shapes to make the car look pretty, and clearly they did this. Like, if I'm honest, this car looks significantly prettier than the Macan EV. The Macan EV, it's too bloated. It wasn't, like a Macan to me, there's a certain like sports car look to it more than Cayennes in the past. Here, it's now the inverse. This is more the sports car look. However, the engineers, they had to get their pound of flesh. They wanted things to be a bit more square and be able to get the air through the vehicle. So it's all about getting the air away from the vehicle in this case. So they've got this vent that opens and closes, and then they do the Easter egg where they actually have the location of the wind tunnel in Zuffenhausen listed on the actual vent itself. This is the kind of stuff why I bought a Porsche. Then we get into the look of the vehicle in the rear. The taillight, now a little bit behind the scenes, they've been testing these things for like the better part of the past year, right in front of Torrance Airport, where our studio was. So literally, I am looking at this taillight for the past year, and now I see it naked for the first time. And here a couple of things are going on. Number one, it's more pronounced. Like, you don't have the body over the actual tail like you do with Cayennes for the past God knows how many years, 20 some odd years. Here, they've added a different taillight depending on the vehicle. So number one, they all have the lettering lit up, which kind of a debate. When I bought my car, I tried to get them to remove the Porsche. Even with a Sonderwunsch, this is not possible. However, with a Porsche exclusive manufacture, it's not so much a clear tail lamp. They're all a clear tail lamp from the factory, but it changes this trim to match the color of the turbo badging. Again, these are the kind of details why people get Porsches. So we've come to that point in our discussion where we have to put aside all the newfangled bits and nerd out about this being a Porsche. Put another way, all the bits underneath it that make it drive like a Porsche. Now, the first thing we have to focus on is, what are we dealing against? What is working against it being a Porsche? And that is 2,645 kilograms, put it another way, 5,819 pounds. If this was a basic one, it'd be about 200 pounds lighter. So how do we get around that? Well, air ride, like we've seen in Cayennes and Panameras of the past, PASM fitted as standard, Porsche torque vectoring, to be very clear about just the regular Porsche torque vectoring, fitted as standard to both of them. However, this is a turbo, so things change in the turbo. In the back, they do offer a limited slip differential as an option, like old school mechanical deal. Very excited about that, especially considering this being an electric car. Then we press on to what has now become kind of an old trick in driving dynamics, and that is rear axle steer. Mercedes, they've kind of gotten to the point where they're up to 10 degrees of rear wheel steer. Porsches have been about 3. This is now 5 degrees, and it's standard on both of them. While we're looking at the rear of the vehicle, the rear motor on these, they're oil cooled. Then there is a newfangled technology we've spent some time looking at in Rolls Royces, Mercedes, BMWs, and most recently a Land Rover SV, where it's an active roll stabilization. But it works different, where previous versions of this car had an anti-roll bar where it had an electric motor in the center, and it basically would keep the car moving from all these different planes of motion. Here, the Porsche Active Ride is optional just on the turbo, not available in the Cayenne. So the idea is a 5,800 pound car hopefully can go around corners. So think back to when the Taycan first came out. Yes, it was important because it was the first ever production electric Porsche. But to me, it was more important because of the charging architecture. It was 800-volt architecture, unheard of at the time. Shortly after it, Hyundai, Kia with EV6 and Ioniq 5, they did 800-volt architecture. And then Lucid came out with just above that at 900. This kind of follows on the Taycan's footsteps with 800-volt architecture, but what's fascinating here is a departure into more ways to charge it. So there's a charging port on this side, and with all the trends where the kids are going these days, it has a Tesla NACS charging. On the other side, old school charger, so one can turn up to existing chargers here in the US. But wait, there's more. This is where we get into inductive charging. So think about your iPhone, and you sit there at night, and on your night table, you have a charger that you place on a plate that you charge at night. It's not plugged in, it's just inductive charging. The whole idea is you put this thing in your garage, and the car, granted you have to pay extra for it, to have the bits underneath the vehicle for the inductive charging to work. Is it as fast as this system back here? No, 11 kilowatts. However, the system back here can go up to 400 kilowatts. That sounds lovely, but where can one do this? Currently in the US, I think there are 2 networks that can support it. So this is very much forward thinking, but the whole idea of having like a charging plate in your garage, even me, a guy that's still driving a manual transmission, this, pretty cool. So let's have a discussion about batteries. There's the technical chalk talk about it, and then, as much as you don't like discussing it, there's the politics. Let's start with the chalk talk. This 113 kilowatt hour battery, it is made up of 192 pouches. Now this is something that is designed by the folks in Zuffenhausen. That is where we get to the politics. Especially over the past month or so, there's been a lot of discussion about rare earths. Where are the batteries made? This, before we got into all of the discussions between the different powers that be, the folks at Porsche decided to make their own battery. Now, that is to a certain extent. They don't make the actual pouches. They don't make the chemical formulation inside the battery. That they go to kind of the usual suspect there, which is LG Chem in South Korea. But then Porsche take the pouches and they in turn make the entire battery to fit to this vehicle, sits underneath the car. Then they go a step further. Yeah, there's an HVAC system, there's cooling, that's nothing new. What's new to this system, it's like double cooled. It's like a sandwich here. You've got the battery pack, and then you have cooling here and cooling here. By about now, my wizard of post-production has flashed somewhat unbelievable output figures for both the Cayenne Electric and Cayenne Turbo Electric. How do we arrive at that? Well, the basics, the building blocks, is dual motor setup, so they're all-wheel drive. Things in the front, they're pretty much the same between two vehicles. There is a separate inverter for the front, even on the base electric. Then we get to the back. That's where the motor and the inverter changes in the turbo to give it more output. So in the basic one, we've got this 402 horsepower. It doesn't sound like much. Then you get to these ridiculous ZR1 levels for an electric crossover. And then we get into, I think, the most interesting fun fact about the turbo. The electric motors and the inverters in the turbo are made in Zuffenhausen. The electric motor and the inverters in the electric, they're made in Hungary. So a bit of an admission, I was one of those people way back in the day when the Cayenne first came out that was mortified, a Porsche SUV. But then as I got into like the whole Porsche family and understood the Cayenne, man, that's what pays the R&D bill. And if we're gonna get GT3 Tourings and they're gonna pay for it, I'm all too happy for the Cayenne to be there. But then I didn't quite understand it until the Macan came out. Basically, the Macan and the Cayenne, it's not like one is better than the other or bigger than the other or smaller than the other. They're just two different like shapes or sizes of Porsche, and you can outfit them like one more expensive than the other. Like you can have a Macan that's like way more performance oriented than like a basic Cayenne and vice versa. But that still didn't address the packaging. And here, this is kind of the biggest sea change in going to the electric in that it picks up the benefits of EV packaging, and that is a bigger wheelbase. Like, this is a massive change. It's 5 extra inches. Now, why is that important? That's where the packaging here makes it usable, unlike other Cayennes that came before it. So if we're honest with one another, this is the business end of any SUV, whether it's a Porsche, a Lamborghini, or a Chevrolet. And here I am a 6-footer. I'm sitting behind this new kind of sculpted seat. They all have this single headrest that is sculpted into the back of the seat, even on the basic electric. And here, plenty of room. Now, something fascinating, Porsche actually gives you something for free. I haven't found out why. I asked the product manager, as well as my contact at Porsche Cars North America, and they said, oh, it's a more luxurious car. I have to believe there's some engineering reason, but the electric seat in the back is fitted as standard. Like even Mercedes doesn't give you this kind of stuff for free. So it's forward, backward, as well as the recline. So this is about the farthest that I'm gonna go back here. Plenty of room. This one has all the HVAC controls. As we've learned in the past, this was very expensive to add. And then there's a neat little trick they have going on here where a panoramic sunroof is not standard. You have to pay extra for that. However, there's 2 different panoramic sunroofs. There's one with the opacity control and there's one without the opacity control. In either case, there is no sunshade. Now, I love me the technology of the opacity control. However, you ask anybody that has a Tesla or a Lucid, they want a sunshade. I think this is an area where Porsche keep the opacity thing, but we still need some sort of electric sunshade. And I think the reason why they didn't do this is because it takes up space. So the idea is you're sitting on the battery, and because you're sitting on the battery, you're sitting a little higher. Even though this car sits a bit lower and has a lower roof line, they wanted to do more headroom. Works really well here. They didn't do the Cadillac Lyric trick where they put the sunroof in as standard. That's not because they're generous. They do that because they want to give you more headroom, and the best way to do that is to carve out more room by utilizing the glass roof. Now, if I'm reading between the lines, the real reason why there's no electric sunshade, I'm thinking it would take up an inch of that valuable headroom. However, this is not the most controversial part of the electric Cayenne. Instead, it's the dashboard, or shall I say, the screenboard. This is not an iPad on wheels. This is many screens that are organized in a way we have not seen before on a car that has touched US soil. First, there is the traditional Porsche curved screen. We first saw this on the Taycan, then the Macan EV, and sadly we're seeing it in 911s. Please change this. However, over here, we have a curved screen, meaning it starts here, it goes all the way down here. Now this one you're looking at, the turbo, has a passenger screen. This is on offer in both the turbo and regular electric. This is one piece of glass, but for the avoidance of doubt, it is two screens. Okay, this is lovely. However, how do you control it? First, the good news. The good news is we have some controls here, like I can do the temperature, the fan speed, like in my own car. There is a scroll wheel here for the volume. This thing here, it's leather. They call this the Ferry pad. And the idea is it's a palm rest, so you can access all this stuff here, like the fan, the temperature, but then there are menu controls that are in this bottom part of the curved screen. So let's say for the sake of discussion, I want to go to the main menu. This is the home button. But let's say I want to go into the navigation. I hit this. I want to go into the media, phone, car settings, and all the apps. I can do this here. But notice the apps are in the bottom part of the screen. However, I can hide this, I think. Let me go here. Yeah, I can hide this. And now I can play around with the graphics. So this isn't quite to the level of like Rivian with Unreal Engine, but the speed of the processor, that's the good news, absolutely just mind-numbingly fast. This we haven't seen in a Porsche before. Then we can go into the different settings for the heated seat, the control, all kind of stuff. The transmission, this is very similar to Taycan's. We first saw this thing here. Not a huge fan. I would still prefer to have something down here. Now, pressing on from Porsche's attempt to placate a younger generation, tactile feel. This is how we talk to actual Porsche folks. Here, it's like any other Porsche that came before it. Everything you touch is to a very specific level. Now, granted, this is a turbo, so it has better fit and finish than the basic car we saw over there. However, a number of things going on. Number one, you've got this storage here, a bit more than Cayennes in the past. However, one can have this and this, the tactile feel, to match. They do this whole mode thing within the screens. You can also have different packages to change the interior, and that's on top of all the CXX and the Sonderwunsch and all those bits. Now, speaking of optional, the seats you see here, they're the 18 ways, and like every other Porsche that came before them, they're optional. I'm willing to bet you they're probably going to be like a $3,500 option. Now, there's some minor bits I have yet to share with you. One of them is a party trick that is literally stolen out of Cadillac's playbook from like 1980. Soft closed doors. Fitted as standard to both the electric and the turbo, not on any other Cayenne that came before it. Then they have these bits here, the wheel wells. This one on the basic car, yeah, you've got the Subaru look to it, but on the turbo with a specific wheel package, it comes out a bit more and looks so much cooler. I would say I'd wanted body color. And then yes, there is a frunk. Not particularly usable. Then we get into the money. This is not cheap, as you can imagine. It is more expensive than a gas Cayenne. However, this is where we get into how much do people pay for options in Porsches. Now, over many years, I've shared with you the average spend in options is $25,000. So the basic price of a gas Cayenne, which still exists and will continue to exist, because remember, it was just last year we looked at the E3.2, so I'm guessing it's going to be around for 3 more years. And I did confirm with Porsche, they are going to bring out a completely new gasoline-powered Cayenne. They're not going to make the same mistake they did with the Macan, which they now have to go fix also with the 718 series. But that's a discussion for a different day. So that brings us to the elephant in the room. The gasoline Cayenne, $86,000. This, $109,000. Now, I don't want to be Captain Obvious here, but that's a hell of a lot more money. Porsche will tell you that there's a lot more fitted as standard. Like we talked about, the electric seats in the back, some of the bits, the chassis options, that's all fitted as standard. Like, for example, PASM, that is optional on a basic V6 Cayenne. I'll let you determine if that makes sense. Then we get to the turbo. That ain't cheap, $163,000. My guess is most folks that will get to $200, probably $250 when you get into CXX and Sonderwunsch type deals. Okay, so that's all fine and good, but what does this mean in the grand scheme of things in the Porsche world? That's where we have to go back to the Macan EV. I never was a huge fan of the vehicle. It's very handsome, but it's not like, oh my God, I want that because I need practicality. That's what I felt about Macans. That was the car I would always suggest to friends of mine when they had kids or they needed some semblance of practicality. That's where this comes in. This is now attractive. Yes, it's very heavy. I would prefer it to be 1,000 pounds lighter. In reality, we can't have that right now. Probably in 10 years, we get to have nice things. Yet this, I think, picks up from some of the mistakes from the Macan EV. Biggest one being they didn't do a gas. This one, they're going to continue with the gas and have a new gas coming out in a couple of years. However, this one, it's probably the most successful Cayenne design I've seen since it came out. But this is the point of the episode where I'm only one man. I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoMan TV all in word, MotoMan TV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I'm not just looking for, do you think this is going to be successful? That's not really the question I'm posing here. The design. Does this work independent of it being an electric car? Till I see you in the next episode, bis später.